Okay, Spiz and Munsil Ultra HD benchmark disc. I just wanted to go over today the basics, very simple player setup and color contrast and things like that, and just some of the things along the way that I've actually picked up on and just are really interesting. So let's just take a look. I've took screenshots of these, and I think it was the best way to present these. The screenshots are not actually about quality, it's just about simple, just as long as we can see it, it's fine. There are some, so this is the player setup section, and there's a few things that people need to be aware of, I think. So, resolution. In my opinion, all 4K players, if they do not output native resolution, which most of them don't, Oppo does, my Revon does, it's called Source Direct, I believe. That's actually really nice. If you play 1080p content, it will display it in native 1080p, and obviously 4K would be native 4K. The reason to set this to 4K on any other player that does not do that, or even say a Roku box or any other thing that does not output native resolution, is there's potential for handshake issues here. I've heard some stories where when you put this into auto, some TVs just don't handshake correctly. I mean, I used to have a Vizio TV, and that was just notorious for really bad handshakes, even if you turned everything on in the correct order and things like that. This avoids one of the handshake steps. It just essentially forces 4K through to the player, or to the TV, sorry, or the display. And I think this is the best option no matter what. Again, this player scales everything up to 4K anyway, whether you're in auto or 4K, and this setting it manually into 4K avoids that step. I will talk about this. Let's talk about this now, actually. So you have choices on the player of what you actually want to do. Whether you want to set the player as 10-bit or 12-bit. Now, for me, I don't think there's any difference between 10-bit and 12-bit because they don't affect Dolby Vision anyway. This is just HDR10, and then it would essentially be Blu-ray, SDR content as well. The reason there's potential, though, for it to make a difference is in 60 frames per second content, which this disc has. So I realized right away that my player wasn't actually set up correctly to actually view this disc, because I was just running 12-bit 444, and that spec doesn't exist in the HDR. You're way over spec. Yeah. 10-bit 422 doesn't exist either in this either. So you kind of like, what is actually better here, 422 12-bit or 420 10-bit? I don't know. Does it really matter? Unless there's some glaring issue here with 420, I'm not sure that this truly matters. When you look at the, I call things, a lot of the times I call things scaling, right? But if you look at this would essentially be native. There's no scaling going on whatsoever, chroma scaling, Now the player would have to essentially convert this to 2, right? So there is scaling going on there. However, I think this player is so good at chroma that this wouldn't be a problem either, because I think the TV would have to convert this anyway. Not 100% sure about this. What I would always recommend, though, is what do you want movies to use? If you were like, look, hey, I'm going 12-bit. Then you can do 12-bit auto, I'll show you in a minute the settings. Some TVs I've heard have issues with banding on 12-bit. It must be due to a data issue. I'm not 100% sure about that, but essentially the TV's got to accept that signal now. With 10-bit, everything's kept native anyway. All of these panels and TVs and things like that, they're 10-bit panels anyway. Do you want that? Do you want that conversion happening? A weaker display might be introducing these banding lines and things like that. It's just things to consider. So yeah. So I was testing different modes here to see how things were displayed and whether that was correct. So I've set this to auto and 10-bit now. Oh, that's how it was set. And right now, so now let's force something to happen. So let's try and force 12-bit 444 and see what happens. Right, we go into the color space, the high frame rate one here. In Dolby Vision, everything displays correctly because you cannot control anything in Dolby Vision. It just locks everything out. But in HDR, this is incorrect. We should be in HDR, and we're not. And we're in 8-bit as well. It down converts to 8-bit. Now, this isn't the player's fault. This is just the mere fact that the HDMI spec just doesn't support this. It's just too much data. So the only way was to down convert this, unfortunately. So I was like, okay, let's see if we can actually completely fix this. So I set this to auto and then 10-bit. Let's see what happens. Like this chart, like this says, if you're in 10-bit, it would go to 420, and it goes to 420. So then I try the 12-bit and 422, and we're in 422. So I'm not sure whether this really makes any difference whatsoever. So all I will say is, if you are not somebody like me that wants to mess around with a lot of this stuff, I would just leave things as they are. And again, as long as you're not getting HDMI handshake issues or anything like that. So auto YCBR, and you can pick whatever you want, 10-bit or 12-bit. 10-bit is safe just in case certain displays have banding trying to accept that 12-bit signal. The TVs that I would be buying typically wouldn't have that. Is it necessary to upscale to 12-bit? Not really. What's coming off of the disc is 10-bit, so you can do what you want. I have my player now set up to 10-bit and auto YCBR. So when you play movies, this will play movies in 10-bit, exactly what's coming off of the disc, and the color space chroma would be 444. My thoughts on that is that this player is so good at chroma, I'd rather have the player do it than the TV do it. So yeah, that's some basic setup stuff there. Most players will have this choice as well, so this is kind of why I'm going through this. And once I saw my disc not being played properly, I was playing in 8-bit, I was like, okay. So but again, I don't have handshake issues or anything like that with this, so I'm kind of fine with that. Now this is my I labeled it turn off, and you'll see why. Maybe go full screen here just so we can see everything. Dynamic contrast, super resolution, anything like this, peak brightness. This is for SDR specifically. Get them off. On HDR, this would be turned on. But when you're in a calibration mode and you're trying to work out where is, say, where should the contrast be, things like that, all of this should be turned off. Now I think all of this should be turned off anyway. I don't have anything on my TV turned on, nothing. But you know, if you like some of these things and it works for you, you know, go ahead. That's up to you. I don't advise it, but same with all of this noise reduction, MPEG noise, all of this smooth gradation, everything is off. The only thing that is on is Real Cinema. Now Real Cinema is 5.5 pull down. There's some frame rate tests you can do on this disc, and it really shows you. I think there's a woman swinging, and you can really see the difference between when Real Cinema is on and then when Real Cinema is off. This doesn't improve frame rates, but it gives a perception of a smoother 24 frame judder. So this is the only thing that I advise anybody to turn on, and projectors have this as well. Whatever they call it, I'm not too sure what they would call it. Most panels that are OLEDs are 120 frames a second, so they should have something like this that makes it so they can use 5.5 pull down. It just, to me, makes 24 frames look smooth. It looks to me natural. Some people still think it's too strong. Hey, you know, that's it. There's another setting here as well, True Motion, that is straight up off. That should, in my opinion, that should never be on. Maybe there's something to be said about gaming and things like that, but for me, no. I want everything that gets turned off apart from this, because I think this is essential. This is even for me with this off, the 24 frame judder on an OLED is just, I think it's too strong. To be honest though, even on a projector, I had a projector with it was 48 frames, and you could use 2.2 pull down, and it just, again, it made frame rates look smoother. So I think that's how it should be done. So the LG has an option called Just Scan. Now this is for overscan. I almost forgot what it was there. So overscan, every TV should have something like this. The thing is, I don't know what they're called on other displays. Just Scan on means you will see every single pixel on the screen. If you turn it off, I'm not sure how much it removes. I don't know. It potentially could be 2.5% or anything like that. I don't want that. I want to see every single pixel on the screen. Some labels could be like 1-to-1 pixel mapping or things like that, but just make sure this is on, because you want to see the full image, you want to see the full resolution, pixels, everything, and then everything is framed correctly. So another thing actually I didn't go over, because they're locked on my TV, color gamma, in my opinion, should be set to auto, and the gamma should be set to BT 1886. However, with that said though, the BT 1886 and gamma 2.4 are exactly, I believe, from my knowledge, they're exactly the same. So now on some TVs this is locked out, and obviously on my LG C9 this is locked out. But if you use, there's an app here, it's called Color Control app. You can access certain things essentially by going into the menu, telling the color gamut to switch to auto, and even though this is locked, it would switch to auto. And the gamma here, it would, instead of this being locked, I think it was either 2.4 or 2.2. You can actually change it. Whether this makes some TVs, like the LG C1, are still affected by this, even though they're locked out, and you actually have to use a color control app to actually get the most out of, like, say, SDR and things like that. It's a little bit advanced. So I wouldn't necessarily worry too much about this, but I just wanted to go over, if you do get the option for these, this is what SDR should be, and HDR should be 2.2 gamma. The color gamma itself should, in my opinion, should always be auto. So, alright, that's the overscan. Another thing is, alright, this is a Panasonic UB9000, but any player that has any type of controls, turn them off. Again, this is just for calibration for now. You know, the HDR optimizer on this player, which essentially scales nits from say 10,000 to 1,000, things like that. Everything should be turned off. Interestingly though, on this player you can still see what these settings are set to in this mode. The HDR optimizer's off. You know, everything's set to 0. Everything is set to 0. You know, edge correction even in this mode is all set to 0. Block noise, you know, it's all 0, which is actually really good. So yeah. Now with Blu-ray actually follows this setting as well. As soon as you get into DVD and streaming though, because you can pull up this menu while you stream, if you set it to standard, some of these will be turned on, like this this random sorry, not pink noise, this block noise, random noise, and mosquito noise reductions, they will be set to 2. So with those, you actually would, we're not calibrating on them, so it doesn't matter, but they are actually separate to Blu-ray. Another one that is separate to Blu-ray is if you play anything off of a USB, like I do. I play anything that I encode and things like that, I check it through the USB. USB is actually different as well. You need to go into you need to pull up this menu again in the USB and make sure all the block noise is set to 0. You don't need any of that on and things like that, in my opinion. You know, if I'm watching YouTube, I expect the quality to be terrible anyway. Is this going to help? You know, not really. Again, on Netflix, because you can watch Netflix on this player, Amazon Prime or Prime Video. You know, these are, as soon as you get into streaming, this is the settings you get. You know, they can be off. Anyway, going off on a tangent there. The player should be in this mode for calibration, because again, everything is turned off, absolutely everything. So I think that's it for just this section of yeah. So that's it. So basically at this point the TV is set up correctly with everything turned off. The player has got everything turned off. So at this point we're in a perfect setting right now to start looking at these test patterns, color contrast and everything like that, to see what the TV can actually really do. I always start with SDR because a lot of the times there's more, you can play a little bit more with SDR. With HDR, a lot of the TVs nowadays pretty much come set up correctly, and it would be very strange for a TV to be like, yeah, this is way off. But there might be some play with SDR content. So a lot of this stuff though still applies to these menus are exactly the same on the HDR disc. So but it's good to look at this. So yeah, brightness or black level control is really what it should be called. This is how it looks on my C9, and this is how it should look on every display. My 2% is actually not this visible. The phone is picking up way much more black level detail than I see. It's not actually this bright, but there's two lines here. Let's show them. These are below black, and this is below black as well, 2% and 4%. You should not be able to see these ever. If you see these, your brightness, black level control is set up too high. And essentially, so again, this brightness here, I raised it 10 clicks, it's normally at 50, and this is now what you're able to see. This is not good. So, but it's good to see, oh, okay, we're seeing everything in the signal. Some old players, you wouldn't actually be able to see this because this signal here is actually beyond limited. A limited black level signal would be from 16 to 235, I believe. So anything under this would just be clipped anyway. But luckily we can fully see this. Basically, you lower your black level brightness until these match this black background. Now there are a couple of things to be said though on an OLED, and the reason I just would not touch this is because I can raise the brightness by one click. I can go to 51 and I've lost black. The black floor actually gets raised, and it took me a little while to see it. I made sure all the lights were turned off, there's no light coming in or anything like that. Completely blacked out room. And OLED black, which is complete inky absolute black, raising it to 51, you lose it. You can't have that. You know, you've bought, if you buy an OLED, you know why you're buying. One of the reasons why you're buying an OLED is because you want perfect blacks. Well, I say perfect blacks. You want blacks to be deep black, right? 51 loses it on my TV. Some TVs though, when they're brand new, could be even darker. It requires like 100 hours of burn-in, maybe even 200, to really flesh those, allow those black levels to really push up and stabilize and be where they're supposed to be. So after about 200 hours, you really should be seeing the black levels as they're supposed to be looking on a display. On an OLED, again, I don't advise going over whatever the factory default is. Maybe on a Sony, I don't know if it's the other way around, but I think it's 90. I think it is, or is that the contrast? I can't remember now. But again, most of the time this should be set up correctly. It'd be very strange if they wasn't. Back in the day when TVs weren't even set up correctly from the factory, if anyone remember those CRT days, you know, lowering the black level to like 37, 38 to get this to look perfectly with a DVD calibration disc or even a laser disc or something like that, you had to do that. You fully had to, back in the old days, you had to manually do everything. You had to get the color correct, you had to get the contrast correct, but most of these TVs are actually set up correctly now. This is really just to make sure they are, and you know, so now contrast. This is interesting because my LG C9 comes at by default at 85 contrast. You start going above this and you start to clip these, and if you go below, you lose dynamic range because what happens is now you actually start to pull the white point down. So that's always one thing to consider, like with contrast. You can go high, you can go above 85. This white point will never change. This is as bright as white can be. But there's a point where on the contrast scale, once you hit that point, and again my TV was 85, you go to 84, 83, and now you see this. The white is actually getting duller. So you always want to make sure the TV is max level brightness just where clipping occurs. So that's really what I was looking for. Even if you didn't want to, let's say you didn't want to even see these, it doesn't matter, right? As soon as you see the white to dive down, you know you've hit that point. Again, most TVs should be set up correctly anyway. Chances are there could be a few little clicks here and there that just like optimize it slightly, But again, the goal here is to visually see as many more blocks as possible. Again, as soon as you see white, losing white, you're at that point. And if you're like 2 clicks away from where the factory default is, think to yourself, am I losing contrast by doing this? Or if you're going above, just think about it. If you honestly are gaining things by a couple of clicks here and there, okay, that's fine. Potentially you could as well. My TV is actually professionally calibrated, so it's interesting that a lot of the default setup just seemed to work exactly right. On an uncalibrated, potentially there could be room for movement, but I can't imagine it would be huge. So yeah, there is that. So that's the contrast. The color, this one's interesting. So yeah, this is really color and tint is really an archaic system from the NTSC days. Remember that far back? Yeah. So this as far as I can see, this doesn't work. And if you press down on the remote, you can also get some extra tips from Spears and Munsil. They give you like what this is supposed to represent and things like that. This is good actually for SDR. It's perfect for SDR because this blue, it flashes in and out, so I couldn't grab it. But there's a blue square here flashing, and there's white, and they should, through the blue filter, they should match. They should be exactly the same, and so should the tint. Now, do I go into? Yeah, I do. Now, just a quick conversation about this. I think on this screen, because I do like to, the way we use things, and I think this feedback could be good for if anyone from Spears and Munsil actually does watch this, and just the way people use the disc. What I would have done is video setup, right? I would have had another section here for not LCD, CRT, or put CRT calibration. Now this wouldn't require any more data, and the reason is because in that field, like these, you could just have all of these, right? And they point to exactly the same things as the baseline setup does, except color and tint would be changed or removed. I honestly think this is potentially a little confusing for new people, and the reason I say that is because a lot of new people, or just people picking up the disc, may not understand how this works. They may not have read the booklet. They may not understand that you have to press down on the remote to see extra tips, hints, and things like that. So just looking at this from that point of view of, you've got the blue filter with it, and it potentially may be a little confusing there. However, I kept on thinking to myself, okay, is there a way that I can explain to people how to set their color up without the filter, or even with the filter? Or can I explain to you how this I think should work? Well, there's some interesting things you can do, and I'm not sure if they were designed for this. There's a test pattern. Now this is in the advanced section of the video, and it's in evaluation color. So this is really good. Red is one of the hardest colors to do on an OLED, at least, and I would assume most TVs as well. So for me, it was a good color to choose. Maybe a different display that you have, you knew that, hey, blue on this TV, blue is the hard one to do. Now, if that was the case, I would probably use this one. But for me, red on an OLED and everything like that, it worked out perfectly. So yeah, dynamic range red in the advanced. And what this shows is it shows all the clipping when things clip. So do I go? No. When you looked something through the filter, and you had to fold it 3 times, this was actually even at 65 color. It was completely maxed out. I checked some content like the demo on the Spears and Munsil disc on disc 2, and it was basically oversaturated. It was just too strong. Another thing is on this clipping pattern for red, you would clip out all the way to around here. So yeah, this was definitely interesting. Now for me, there's 2 ways of looking at this, and I found it today because I shot this or captured the screenshots the day before, and today I went and looked at this again to see if there's anything else I could do. Another thing was in the advanced video again, it's called color tint red. Everything's red for some reason, but a red is a really good one. Now this is super interesting, and I don't think this was designed to be used this way. I'll go full screen again. Don't think this was designed to be used this way, but it somehow ended up working. Put the the glasses, right, you can fold them with the blue filter, and I folded them. I lowered the color until you could see the difference between these two. There was an obvious difference at around 43 color, and I said, okay, that's interesting. Then what you do is you take the color back up until it smooths out. Now, in all fairness, it probably smoothed out at around 48, but the default was 50 anyway. And with these TVs, compared to say the old TVs, CRT days, is they're much more granular in their control. So when I say to you the color is 50, let's just say I said the color was around 52, that is actually true because there's so many fine steps in these TVs that you can get away with a margin of error of maybe a few clicks here and there. Maybe brightness, you can't do that, but I'm talking around here with color and say clipping and things, you can get away with a few clicks. Interestingly enough, the default for this TV comes at 55, and okay, let me right, yeah, I'm losing my thought here. It comes at 55, right? Now, I think why they did that is because you actually get maximum saturation of these two colors. They absolutely match at 55. But the thing is, if you go to the clipping pattern, you actually clip. So, yeah, the thought process is there again. They want the TV to look saturated, deep colored, and everything like that in a non-calibrated sense. But you actually start to clip here. And this is actually why 50 is better from a accuracy point of view. 50 is better because you just gain so much more here. And a 5 was only a few clicks. So in one sense, yeah, there is a range from say 55 to 50 in the color department where you could go if you wanted more saturation. Yeah, you lose accuracy because you're going to start clipping things. But I did find this test interesting. And again, the reason I'm bringing this up because in the color and tint department, again, this is why I would have wanted a CRT section, because color and tint is meaningful. The problem is color and tint is not meaningful in our displays today. It's not. This is not. I feel as though this is out of place here. And again, I think there could be some confusion about, really how to deal with this. What I would like is, and again, I'm not sure if it is possible, but to design something very similar to this, if not this, where you could say, okay, that's my colors set up correctly because this clips absolutely perfectly. You don't need the top and the bottom layers. Like maybe they could have designed something where it was 100%, 95, you know, 90, 85 going down, and you just see where these clipping points are, and then you would know your color is correct. I'm not sure how they would do it. I just think it would clear up a lot of this archaic, little bit of archaic confusion that I don't think color and tint should be here. You know, like I said, it's an NTSC thing anyway. You know, this is not how we deal with color and tint now anyway. So this is even on the HDR and the Dolby Vision. So yeah, but again, the best accuracy one that I could find is this red clipping pattern. Absolutely perfect. At 50, clipped absolutely perfectly. And if you went below, again, much the same with the white clipping pattern. Once you start going below 50, you actually end up losing red, and it's the same. It's, you know, it's exactly the same. So I find that interesting. Right, so I went over that. Okay, yeah. Right. Now this is maybe, yeah, let's talk about this actually. So this obviously flashes in and out, and you can see all of the this is a gamma 2.4. These are visible, it's just the phone not picking up on things. You have to strike a balance between the brightest things and not on a phone. Well, on a camera really. So one thing I found though is the last two, the camera's picking up on them, but the last two were actually kind of a little difficult to see. And in HDR they're actually a little bit more difficult to see. But all of these are visible, at least they should be on any display. So yeah, this is really cool. This is called backlight, and I found this one really interesting because you're in SDR. How bright do you want things to look? Now I find that on an OLED it's called OLED backlight. Sorry, backlight, not blacklight. OLED backlight, and I find that SDR brightness is down to personal taste. If you wanted true values, it's significantly low. So there's an app, it's called Lux Light Meter, and I took a few screenshots of this. Now when I have the OLED backlight set to 10, it's outputting 133. Now we're assuming this is nits. Remember, this is on a phone. 100% accuracy, no. Ballpark, yeah. So roughly 130 nits, right? And the back level is at 10, or the backlight is at 10. For me, that's too low. You know, sure, we want to be getting close to accuracy and things like that, but for me personally, one thing with SDR is I want a certain level of brightness, and I'm willing to accept it not looking absolutely perfect or exactly as, say, a proper 100 nit display would look. Now, interestingly enough, the OLED backlight, if I put the OLED backlight up to 54, we're now at 340 nits. So that really just shows you kind of like where you can go with this. Now, for me, if you wanted, for me, something that looks nice is around 36. We actually calibrated to around, I think we calibrated to around 34, but you know, I tend to go up in increments of 9, so this is why I went to about 54, then I went to 45, then 36, 27, and things like that, and you get an idea of like, hey, how bright do you want your image to look in SDR? My goal is I'm calibrated, I'm as accurate in the colors as I can get, and I don't want this completely huge swing difference between an SDR disc and a HDR disc. So I choose to go around 36. You could go to 45, but that's about, for me, the limit of brightness there. One thing to say as well is the stronger the light on any TV, if anything, you tend to potentially wash out SDR colors as well. It really, to be fair though, I don't think that's truly visible. But again, for me, this is one setting on the backlight where I'm in favor of losing accuracy to have a brighter image. You know, I think a lot of people would be there as well, because at this point, to get to 100 nits, my I can't even talk. Backlight level or OLED level would be at like 9 or 8 to get to 100 nits like properly, and it's just like, nah. So again, I think this is a personal taste, and on an OLED, personally, I think around 36 for SDR makes the content look nice and vibrant. It's colourful, and the differences between the HDR are a lot smaller. So sharpness. Well, this is interesting. So I overheard an interview the other day on YouTube about sharpness, and I think Don Munsil was talking about this, and that sharpness is perceptual. So even if there's ringing artifacts on the screen, say in pixel peep-in territory, which is right up on the screen, when you're back in your seat, can you see them? So the default sharpness on an LG OLED is actually 10. So I thought, okay, well, let's actually see what's going on here with these pans. I could not see any sharpness increase whatsoever, ringing any difference to this image up to 10, which is interesting again because the default is 10. To me, I mean, I'm not sure what's happening between 0 and 10 though, like you know, behind the hood, so to speak. Like what is happening? But as soon as you go above 10, 11s into the 15s and things like that, I can see ringing all the way around here. And for me, that's unacceptable. And to me, I'm one of those types of people as well that if it's in the signal path, I don't care if back here I can't see it anyway. It's in the signal path, so I wouldn't go any further than this. I would never go above the default of 10. But I am testing this. I'm typically a person though that on every display I've had, I've always put my sharpness to 0. Maybe the best setting actually on a Vizio was 11. I swear it came at 11. And there was just that point where 11 was absolutely perfect. But yeah, I don't want artifacts, ringing artifacts being introduced into the source in any way. And I don't care how far away from the screen I am and things like that. I just don't. Interestingly enough, on a projector, when we used to have a projector when I lived in New York, don't know if they have sharpness controls, but I know they have focus controls. For anyone that used to have projectors or you have projectors, I don't know if you've had a projector that was a manual focus. A manual focus, you had a ring, like a ring, I guess, on the top that would spin around. The thing is, when you put pressure on it, it would change the focus as you just put pressure on it. I was the one up by the screen, and I'd get my dad or my brother to adjust it, and I'm like, right there, perfect. And then they take the pressure off, and I'm like, well, I just lost focus again. So I had to get like a like, I don't know, like almost like a needle type thing, that type of thing where you could just move it without putting too much pressure on it, and move it as That's how picky about focus on the projector I was. I went right up to the screen and I wanted that pixel perfect focus that I'm sure you can do perfectly easily nowadays. I'm sure you can just manually, adjust it until you get it perfect. But back in the day, I'm screaming at my dad, to get this absolutely perfect. Those were the days, eh? CRT days, DLP projections, and yeah, it was. I'll be honest. For me, from calibration point of view, that was kind of like the golden era for me. Like geometry as well. Geometry. You could go into the service menu and completely change the geometry. Really, the overscan yourself, but you could create the blocks. You'd have to do blue first, then you'd do red, and then you'd do green, and they should all match up. I created this system in my head with masking tape on the screen to get everything, Whew, that was wild. Those were the fun days. Now we just have, hey, sharpness, try and get it right. For the most part, I wouldn't bother with this. I would set it to 0. That's what I would advise. OLEDs are sharp enough anyway. Can anything be gained from this without introducing anything? I'm not sure. I am testing it, but I what am I gaining? I don't really know. I'd like to look at very fine detail and see if there's any kind of differences there. But ultra fine detail, does it actually introduce ringing into super fine detail at 10? I don't know. So I advise 0, and all displays I would advise 0. I think Sony actually is 50. They actually start right there. So I just don't want. I just don't like the look of things being over sharpened. I really don't. Ringing around hard objects like this, I cannot stand. If anyone's actually read some of my reviews, yeah, I can't have that. So anything that would eliminate that, OLED for me is I just can't imagine there's any softness there. Now some TVs are actually soft. I bought a TV just for outside, right? And if you send the sharpness to 0, it's actually really soft. It's it's unacceptably soft. So you actually have to raise the sharpness on there. I'm not sure what it is, but it's just a TV for downstairs. But I kind of, the way I am, I'm going to go downstairs and take my 4K player down there, plug it in, and see what the real sharpness is. That's anytime I get a display in my house, that's the type of person I am. Spears and Munsil disc comes out, let's get a 4K player down there, see if everything's set up correctly. Now again, we're outside, so there's so much light. With there being so much light, say outside, from a calibration point of view, everything I was trying to find in the menu was gamma. Raise the gamma, raise the gamma, raise the gamma. And the reason I was doing that is because I'm trying to create so much black level detail when there's sunlight outside and things like that you can actually still see it. So OLED outside would be terrible. You definitely couldn't do that. I'd have nightmares doing that with black level detail and things. So right, now these were just some of the settings I was testing. These are not real settings, but at the end of it, like with the blue filter and things like that, this is there's some of the things that I got. 54 is obviously way too high for SDR. But again, what do you like? If you like your SDR to actually look really bright, I wouldn't really go. I've actually tried going above this, and then we really do start to get a little bit too bright. Under 50, like 45 and 36, I really think is I think 36 is about where it's at personally. So sharpness should be 0, color should be 50. And interestingly, the default is 55, and I understand why they did it, because you just get full saturation at 55. complete oversaturation though at 65 when you look at the other test pattern. So yeah. Okay, now this is interesting, right? So we're into, this is HDR now. So contrast should be at 100, OLED light should be at 100, sharpness is at 0. You could test 10, but sharpness is at 0, color is at 50. Tint shouldn't even be on this. Now this is interesting. So now I'd done the basic calibration. I went through things in HDR the same way I did in SDR. So with the Panasonic UB9000, I think this is rare for other players to have this. You have a dynamic range adjustment. Now the dynamic range adjustment does not need to be the optimizer here. If this optimizer's off, these settings still work, by the way, because it almost gives you that impression like, well, the optimizer, if the optimizer's off, then I'm assuming all these settings are off as well. They're not, no. If you didn't want to use the optimizer, if you knew every single disc was 1000 nits, which to be honest most of them are now, that are HDR only, you don't really need this on, because at 1000 nits with the OLED setting, I wouldn't assume this is on anyway, because you're at 1000 nits, so it shouldn't be doing anything. So, but when you put 10,000 nit content in, obviously it's you know, you need it. So again, these are settings that I don't like to keep going in and switching off and on and on. They're either on or off for me. But sometimes, you know, in evaluation things like this, it's good to test and see what does what. So the dynamic range adjustment, I was leaning to 2 anyway. I have a scene in heat that I tested, and but lately I've been leaning to 3, and here's why. So this is that black level. This is difficult to see, and I do apologize. This really is getting in the way here. But this is that black level pattern where this is at 2%, that you have the black and the blacks here and things like that. Now on an OLED, if you know anything about OLEDs, around 2.5%-ish, around anything under this 4% really, or anything under 5 you could say. If anything, OLEDs tend to start crushing all this black level detail. So if you can see the difference here, this first shot here is with the dynamic range adjustment at 0. Right? It's very difficult to see. Even in a completely blacked out room, it's actually very, very difficult to see. But when you put +3 on, it just becomes so much better to see. Now what I do advise is checking out some real world content for this, and I did actually last week. So last week I watched Ant-Man and the Wasp, and on an OLED, LG C9, let's just say that, fully calibrated, everything. If this was at 0, the movie is sensationally dark. It's too dark. It's just too dark. When you put this to +3, to my eyes, that's exactly where it should. It looks natural, and that's where things should be. Now, in previous videos, I've said +2 is good, and I think +2 is really where you see that kick there, right? +3 just elevates it slightly more to where certain movies don't have that appearance of black crush. That's the biggest thing I can take away from this. You can go +2, you can go +3, and I don't. However, there are negative effects on this, and I want to explain them. And it's the way this actually works. So let's just explain a bit more. Now we get into EOTF tracking instead of Gamma 2.4. This is EOTF is very similar to Gamma. So I with these black levels here, right? Seeing when things clip. Now on a C9, if you set this to 0, fully calibrated, you really struggle to see these. These basically they start clipping out around here. You start crushing early around here. But if you can see here, there's slight detail here now. When you have +3, you can see all this black level detail. It's raised. So there's a balance. There is a balance to this that I want to explain now. Do I have the image really quick? Yes, I do. Okay. So, what's the best way to explain this? I did put this together. Alright, this is crude, I know. But I want to give you an idea of... this is just a photo editor app. But I just wanted to give you an idea of the mindset that I have as to understand what is actually happening here with all this crush, right? So like this is crushing, and this, if you go too low on the setting, it is crushing, right? So here's how a display should work. All displays in the future, you know, let's we want a perfect display. A perfect display is displaying everything from 0 nits up to 100 here, all the way up to 1000. There's no clipping of whites up to 1000. We can display everything up to 1000. The display can actually display 1000 nits on screen. Full screen might be a little pushing it, but we get there, right? Nothing is clipped in this signal. Nothing in the blacks is clipped, and I'm using the word clipped interchangeably with clipped on whites. I just do that, you know. But so everything in the display path here that is 1000 nits is displayed on the screen. However, when you have this set to, if you have this set to 0, optimizer's off, or you have the other mode, nothing. So all of this is off. In my mind, this is what's happening. The picture is being crushed. Black level detail here is actually being crushed, right? There's things here we cannot see. It's not in the display path. OLEDs, this is, but let's just assume, right, we're on an OLED, right? 2.5%. We start seeing things now around 2.5% black, and everything's good. We can see, but all of this detail here is lost. This is, in my opinion, how an OLED comes. And I've seen some recent reviews basically showing this as well, where the black level detail is just being crushed out. Now, on OLEDs, we love black, and we want things to be black, but some of the detail as well is falling down too fast, and you just can't see it. This is really my biggest problem. Instead of them going as bright as they can with all these TVs, they need to fix this first, right? Now, this is better than LCD. This is better than CRT. This is all. We're still better than those technologies. It's better than projectors. It's better than everything like that. We have much better dynamics and everything like that. But the black level detail crushing like this is an issue. What this setting does, in my mind, is, let's just say the dynamic range was this on my OLED currently, yeah, fully calibrated, because my calibrator said after calibration the display does crush towards the end. It just cannot do blacks. Now manually we might be able to pick that up or something like that as well. There's potential there, but OLEDs all do this. What I think this is doing is this here is +1, +2, +3, and now things are visible, like fully visible. That's what it's doing. It is pushing up the entire range. This is pushing up the entire range. 1000 nit here, 1000 and 0 here, or 0.05 nits down here, all the way at the very bottom, pushing until we see full black level detail. Now there is a problem. So here's the problem. Okay, the problem is that we've pushed beyond what the TV is capable of. Let's just say this grew out as well, because we've pushed up. I do hope you can see this. You can, good. Yeah, this line, good. This line represents 1000 nits. I didn't know you couldn't see this. It's good I actually checked there. So it doesn't matter. There's just a saying 1000 nits here. It doesn't matter. But when you're pushing up the entire range, you're also pushing up this. This clips start to now. You're now clipping your reds, your whites. You're now clipping more information. But here's where the balance comes in, or the trade. Would you rather suffer with black level detail and crushing, or would you accept clipping in your 800 nit range, 700 to 800 nit range, potential clipping there? Now the new TVs are much better at this, right? I think they can tone map to 4000 nits really well. That's fine, that's great. But even then, let's just say you had the same black level detail issue on all OLEDs. You'd still have to push up the range to bring that black level detail in. That's if you even want to do this, right? So there is this trade here with this setting. Yeah. I mean, let's move this real quick just so you can see it. Yeah, what I put there, but it's immaterial. This was with 1000 nits. So yeah, you push up the entire range, and I'm pretty sure that is what this is doing. So again, can you accept that? Can you accept that? Well, my black level detail is now improved, and I don't have that crushed look, but I am going to clip some whites. Now, for me, I accept that, because I want my blacks to look deep black, but I know when an image is just crushing and it doesn't look good. So it really does not look good. So for me, between 2 and 3 is perfect, where on my C9, 3 is absolutely perfect. Calibration, professional calibration, may even make black crush potentially worse on an OLED, because you're balancing the levels to be perfect. Whereas in a default TV, factory default TV, blue is probably raised anyway. Green maybe not too much, but certain of the colors ranges might be raised anyway to give you that impression of more black level detail and things like that. So an uncalibrated display may not need 3. You might be able to fully get away with 2. I'm not 100% sure here. So yeah, I mean, this is really just an issue for, not an issue, but just something to consider if you have a Panasonic UB9000, that some of this can be alleviated. Some of these like discs that you're watching, it's just like black level detail is just way off. Yes, but it pretty much is the display doing this. I want to know how many people that have got OLEDs and they say something's too dark, and it's because they're on an OLED. Whereas Well, LCDs can still crush as well, though. So you know there is that. It's just less there because they can't produce black at the same level. Chances are that the black level is actually pushed up anyway. You're above black. You can raise quicker out of black in an LCD, so than you can on an OLED where it starts to fall off. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's it. I think that's everything talked about, and I hope that is the basics. It might be a little technical here, some of this stuff, but you know, that's just really the way it is, you know. So yeah, basic calibration, the way you set your player up, things to turn off, things like that. The color as well, to me, is better on a red clipping pattern. There's that. Brightness, I would never go above the default value, because as soon as you do, you lose OLED black. You know, OLED black, and you can't do that. The Panasonic can help with the black level detail by bringing it up, but remember there are concessions there. You are then clipping some of your whites. I would rather see clipped whites. You don't really necessarily think about it in that way, but I will accept things that clip rather than things that crush. So that's why I think that is good. You don't have to touch it. You know, you don't have to touch that portion of it. If your display you think is, if you're like, look, my black levels are perfect anyway, I'm not touching that. You don't have to touch that. On a C9, on calibrated, I think you do. 100. I think you do 100%. Minimum. If I think 2 is actually perfect, without going too far up into that where you potentially 3 could potentially be too high. But again, I'm watching in real world things like my movie last week. It needed 3. 3 stopped it being, hey, this movie has black crush, to this movie actually looking really, you know, this movie looks excellent. So in Dolby Vision you can't control any of this anyway. Think about that. So Dolby Vision black level should actually be better, but I'm actually seeing some results where Dolby Vision is actually even darker and it crushes even more, and that introduces some issues. So I've heard people even turning off Dolby Vision, even on a Panasonic UB9000, just turning off Dolby Vision, letting everything play in HDR10. You now have this level of control. You have tone mapping, not dynamic, but you have tone mapping on the player, things like that, and that, yeah. Oh, the color space as well. As long as you don't have handshake issues, auto, but put the player in 4K is my advice. Any player in 4K, unless it does the native resolution. So, no, this is a long video. I do long videos, you know. I really appreciate you watching and sticking it out this far. It does show that you're a big fan of all of this. I really, to me, doing the basics as well, just me going over things again, it was good. It brought back memories of me calibrating my old display. You know, old displays, things like that. I went to get my ISF calibration certificate. It was a two-day or 3-day weekend, and yeah, we learned a lot doing that as well. So that was real fun for me. It's just I enjoy this. I really do. So yeah, I do appreciate you watching. Hope that graph, I hope you did see, eventually we did see the full graph, but I don't think my camera got in the way anyway. I think it was okay there. So, but yeah, I really do appreciate you watching. Calibration wise, let me know what TVs you have, and do you use this disc to calibrate? Do you use it to check things? Did you find the red clipping pattern is actually excellent as well? That red clipping pattern is perfect at 50 on my display, whereas 55, which was the default, it clipped and things like that. Panasonic UB9000, how are you using the Panasonic UB9000? Did you use it like me? You had it in 12-bit 444, didn't think about the 60 frames per second content on this disc and potentially how it would affect, you know, now coming out in SDR 8-bit, things like that, because you're actually above the HDMI standard. Just things like that to think about. I don't think most people should be having handshake issues with a Panasonic UB9000 or an 820. I really don't, but again, I have heard that you can. So the color space stuff and the bit depth stuff, I would try auto and auto 10-bit. And again, the reason for that is because some displays might have that banding issue when trying to accept a 12-bit signal. Converting it to 12-bit doesn't actually do anything. You're not gaining in the same way that you're gaining in Dolby Vision and that level of processing. You're just not gaining in that way. So 10-bit auto, which would put things in 444 for me, is where you want to be. Definitely rambling now. Thanks for watching. Let me know what you think to the video, and calibration wise, what fun and over the years and things like that, or with this disc and things, have you experienced? I'd love to know in the comments if you could. And yeah, appreciate you watching, and thanks a lot. Bye.